All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is the Esports Report Daily Update. Puckett and Benson bringing you today's news. And Benson, we asked everyone to send in their tweets about what they thought happened with Optic Gaming and the Call of Duty League last night. Now, number of theories out here, and one thing that actually someone mentioned, Clayster pointed out, he was reading the chat to figure out what was going wrong with the team. At some point, someone mentioned that they're playing too simple, they're playing too basic, and that's what's going wrong. If you look at Envy, though, as a team that goes into competition, Rambo will call the same strat almost 100% of the time because he knows that overall it's going to play out in their favor. Do you agree with that statement that a team could be playing too basic or too simple?
I guess you kind of can, but I remember I had a discussion with Rambo himself because I was like, Rambo, even me as a caster, S&D, sometimes I watch games and I know where you're going to go. And I just know I could pretty much pinpoint on the map where because they do it so often and they do it pretty much every time. And I was like, is that like the best way of going about it? He basically put it in such a simple way. It was like, yes, we play the numbers game. If it works, you don't need to change it. And it's very, very true. You look at the way that they play as a team, and it's so simple but so genius. It is the same thing pretty much every time. Although I was told, because I brought this up with Study as well at the US Championship, they are changing their strats, so they're going to have some completely different ones ready for the World Championships. And that's really exciting for me because I've always said that their search and destroy is just mind-blowing in terms of communication. But going back to Optic, do they play too simple? Well, you look at that lineup and you think, well, they should just slay. Clayster and Scumpy, two of the best slayers, two of the best hype men. All they need to do is just get themselves loud and get themselves excited. And you can just imagine them steamrolling teams.
Well, I asked another question. I said, who from Strictly Business was playing well to help get that 3-0? And I just got a bunch of one-word answers. Saints. Saints. So
no surprise there.
Apparently, people are liking the way he is slaying for that squad. When him and Dito just catch fire, that team
scary.
is so scary. So congrats again to Strictly Business. They have now moved up to a 16-11 record.
Yes.
Very impressive performance. Now up there with the likes of Complexity and FaZe at the top of that leaderboard. Now let's move on to our next topic here as we start to highlight the teams competing at the Call of Duty Championships. Benson, we have Epsilon as one of the most talked about teams in all of UK Call of Duty. Tell me a little bit about this squad.
So Epsilon, for me, fantastic lineup. They showed just great consistency. You look at the 4 players on the team and you think, oh my god, this team could be godly. They really are that good. And for me, there's that constant debate of who's better, TCM or Epsilon. That's all you'll hear across Europe. Even people in France, they have that massive debate. Who's better? Same in Spain.
TEC is not even that mix. It's just Epsilon and TCM.
Well, you see, that's the big thing. It isn't that everyone else isn't worthy to be there, but it's just these two teams are those that have shown the consistency and their dominance so many times, which it's really hard to include any other teams right now in that same sentence.
Pretty interesting stuff there. And even as my first time going over to GoCast at Gfinity, everyone was just talking TCM, but it was really Epsilon was the story.
Right.
TCM was kind of the surprise when they made it all the way to the finals. Epsilon, though, had all kinds of hype, and a lot of it is because they have this guy, King Jerd.
Oh, King
the
Jerd.
Full lineup here, Jerd, Swanee, Tommy, and Flux. Flux, of course, coming over from TCM as Mad Cat went on to join that lineup. And Tommy now joining his friends once again after playing a short stint with some French teams.
Yeah, and bringing those 4 players together, it's just a really, really slay-heavy team to look at. I mean, Jerd was renowned in Black Ops 2 as being one of those players that was going to just run around the map, kill things, cap things, just basically do everything, just cause massive destruction. Swanee, one of the best slayers in the game. That's just a plain and simple fact. Look at what he did last year at the World Championship, teamed with 3 Italian players who obviously very talented. They managed to get there as well, but Swanee was on a different level. And now that he's in a full team and you surround him with players like Tommy and Flux, I really expect big things from them at World Champs, because this is one of the first times where realistically people from the UK and people from Europe can say, all right, we have a fair representation. This is a good representation. Let's see how they now go up against some of the best teams in North America, and let's really see if they are as good as people believe.
Now, what's the highest Epsilon has placed? Because I remember they came over with a slightly different lineup, and they went up on the main stage, went all the way to Game 5, I believe it was against Envy.
I think.
And they fell in that and then immediately got eliminated from the losers bracket.
Top 12. I'm pretty sure it was around that top 12 because it was 2 European teams at that event. I think they finished 12th and 16th. So history doesn't really side with the Europeans coming over across the pond. We've seen it a fair few times, but world champs last year sort of threw in a little bit of a curveball there, you know, some European teams who I don't think really people expected, but still placed very well. But this, as I said, is going to be the true representation of a solid European lineup going up against the best of North America and the best of the rest of the world as well. So I'm really excited to see how everyone's going to play.
Now let's bring in our special guest to give us a little bit more information about this squad. We have Josh now joining us from the UK. Josh, where exactly are you located today?
I'm in lovely Birmingham.
Lovely Birmingham.
It's beautiful there, I hear. Lots of rain and gray stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Rain and grey stuff, really.
Well, Josh, we know that you are too young to be on a Call of Duty Championship lineup for this year. 17 currently, Josh?
Yep.
All right, so hopefully we'll be seeing you over there next year. But you had an opportunity of watching Epsilon at the EU Championships. Epsilon made it to the grand finals, and I really want you to walk us through that tournament as we take a look at the bracket. What were you seeing from them early on? Were they confident going up against all the other European teams?
I think it was more or less they had a swift, easy run throughout the most of the games. They had like a bye till the semi-finals, and then they got their first real good opponent, which was Vitality Rises, which was actually Tommy's old team, and like it was a lot closer than everyone expected. I think like it went down to last map, and like it could have went either way. Like it was such a good game to watch, and like obviously they did come through and end up winning. Obviously fell short in the final.
Now, what went down in that Epsilon Vitality Rises matchup? Because Vitality Rises is arguably France's top team. I think coming into COD Champs, they do have the highest seed for France. Were they close games? Were they blowouts in favor of Epsilon? How did that play out?
I think it was like close throughout the whole series. Like there was, I think Epsilon dominated like one of the S&Ds, like 6-1. But like the whole series was close, and obviously it went down to last map, so any team could have took it. But Epsilon, with all the experience they've got and like just being the better team, came out and managed to scrape through when it was most needed.
And then obviously after Epsilon took down Vitality Rises, they went up against TCM in the grand final. And as I was saying to Puckett just before, Josh, it's one of those massive debates in Europe. You know, who's better? Is it TCM? Is it Epsilon? Who would you really... Obviously, TCM won in that grand final, but would you really say that it was a fair result? Are Epsilon potentially better than that?
Well, to be fair, before the EU qualifiers, Epsilon dominated every single 2K. They won like 4 in a row. They was winning every scrim. They was destroying everything, and then it got to regionals, obviously, and TCM did come out with a win. But it's really undecided. Like when it come to the LAN event regionals, TCM got hyped. They got in the zone, and like we saw TCM. To be fair, I think everyone will agree we haven't seen before. Like they played so much better than they in like throughout the whole 2Ks, every scrim they played. So it's really undecided, and it'll be interesting to see how they both perform at Call of Duty Champs.
I think the big question though is really what makes Epsilon such a dominant team. I mean, as I said, you know, you put so many Slayers together, and sometimes when that's happened historically, it just hasn't worked out. Whereas this Epsilon team, it seems as if, you know, the Jerd Swanee combination, which was something I was kind of sat there, I was thinking this could work, and then adding Tommy and Flux in. I was sat there, I was thinking, this is a really good team on paper, but is it going to follow through onto LAN? And it sort of has. I mean, why do you think that is? What's the big factor behind that?
I think you said it yourself. When you've got Swanee, Tommy, Jerd, just any of them 4 players in the same team, look, no matter what, even though they didn't come out with a win, like people still forget they come second. They were so close. Like there was 2 points in the first domination. I think it was 1 round in S&D. Like 2 points in the blitz. Like it could have went either way. And like just as you said, the teams, just the players individually are so good, and like any of them in any team can work. And when you got people like Tommy who can make plays and change the game on his head instantly, like it's just a 50-50, and the team just works just the way it is with the team lineup.
Josh, we're taking a look at the roster right now, and I'd love if you could give me a little bit of insight on each player, starting here with King Jerd. What makes this guy incredible at Call of Duty? What are his greatest strengths, and does he have any weaknesses that you think he could work on?
Jerd, obviously, he's known for probably being the best player in Europe. He's so good. The plays he makes, he just runs around, like even with submachine guns, when people have got assault rifles long range and somehow manage to pick up the kills, and some of the clutch plays, like 3 pieces he gets, just unreal. Like people don't know how he does it sometimes. I think when it comes to his negatives, like sometimes, and I think a lot of people have said this, like he can be a bit too aggressive and he challenges a lot of things. Like, but everyone does it when you're in the heat of the moment. Anyone can challenge anything, and like, but he's just a general, just such a good player.
And then looking at Swanee, obviously he was a player that attended the last Call of Duty World Championship, playing with the Italian lineup. He placed very well. I think he finally
Inferno, I
finished
think
8th.
7th there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was 7th, 8th, and he's one of those players which I personally think can just turn games around. I mean, what are your thoughts on Swanee, the good and the bad?
Swanee's he's like people think that he's easy to play against, but Swanee, even if you know where he is, he's just like an immovable rock. Sometimes you just can't kill him, and he's got easily probably the best shot like in Call of Duty you've seen, if not probably pushing the America. He's so good, he just never misses. Obviously going to the negatives, you do know he is, so some teams can counter him, like a lot of teams have started to use smokes against him, and it can like kind of shut him out if you know where he's going to be. But Swanee's just so good, and he turns up a lot, as you said, Call of Duty champs last year. He attended with an Italian team, not expecting to like achieve much, and walked away with like 7,000 each. Like,
pretty good.
Incredible. The results say everything really.
Now, in my limited experiences commentating Swanee, he always had an M8, an assault rifle, in hand back in Black Ops 2. Come Call of Duty Ghost, what are you seeing him run right now?
It's the same. He uses the assault rifle the majority of the time, but he's actually switched it up a fair bit. Like, he's adopted well to this game. Like, there's certain maps like Strike Zone in this game where even Swanee pulls out a submachine gun and runs around and still pulls off like amazing scores. Like, so he's adopted well, and he can just do whatever. He's just a natural slayer, I think.
Now, our next player here on this lineup is Tommy, and Tommy, just as an American looking in, seems to be playing with the new crew every single event. He's almost the Dito of the EU scene from what I've seen. Talk to me about this guy, because Ben was showing me a few of his highlights, not only from Call of Duty Ghosts, but also Black Ops 2. And he seems like he has ridiculous gun skill.
Tommy's, there's too much to say about Tommy. He's probably, in my eyes, he's the best player in Europe. Like, not even just from the game wise, like as a teammate and the strats he brings, the like dedication. Like, Tommy plays, and when he plays to win. Like, I've attended 3 events with Tommy myself, and I've won every single one of them. That says a lot for me. Like,
wow.
He's just such a good teammate, and like some of the plays he pulls off are insane. Like, he's won multiple games single-handedly. Like, I've played against him numerous of times, and he's not my kryptonite. I can't beat him anymore. Like, after EGL 10, I've lost him like 4 times in a row. It's like, he's just such a good player.
Now, so you said Tommy, in your opinion, is the best player in Europe. Is he also now the strat caller from this team? Do you know who's making the strategy and calling the plays in the respawn and search and destroy game modes?
I'm not too sure. I think Tommy's the most vocal, but I think they all have an input. Like, Jared used to be quite known for being quite quiet, but like recently he's like stepped up, and when I'm watching the streams myself, he speaks a fair bit, and he says what he wants to say, and like the strats. Like, but I think it's mostly Tommy, but obviously they all would put inputs. Like, Flux is really good for that, like finding nade spots and finding certain rushes which teams won't understand, etc.
And speaking of Flux, obviously he came over from TCM, who right now are the biggest rivals to Epsilon, and he's one of those players which I used to love watching in Black Ops 2. You just always knew that something amazing was going to happen when you watch Flux. And again, similar question here, what are the pros and cons to Flux?
Flux, I think it's fair to say, is sometimes a hit or miss. Like, he can pull off some amazing players, like the other team players in his team, but then he has his other games where he gets a bit reckless. He might not pull out the best scores, but he still does what's needed to win. Like, I think he's like the only person, when we watched MLG, the first MLG on this game, to pull out a shotgun on Sovereign, and they started running around with people with shotgun, and everyone was like, "What's going on?" And then adapted to it. But like, he's just like, he's really good at S&D as well. Like, he's really like, he's just one. I don't want to. It's just one of the people you don't want to play against, because he's been in that corner where you just don't check. It's just so annoying.
Always that last corner.
Yeah, he's a really good player, and his placements have proved it as well.
Now, I actually had the opportunity to hang out with TCM after the last Gfinity event, and I kind of got into it with Swizz, their coach, and he was arguing, the UK scene's never going to become like the American scene, and I said, that's because you guys don't treat it the same,
right?
And, not always on the professional level. Since then, they've totally cleaned it up, and we're seeing explosive growth over there in the UK, but Flux was that guy at the table who immediately agreed with everything I was saying and kind of got the rest of the team to be thinking about that and moving forward. He is a true professional. He handles himself extremely well. I love this guy and the way he interacts with everyone, not just the UK teams, but the American teams that came over. And also, one of my favorite things about Flux was back in Black Ops 2, the man would pull out the Chicom. He was not afraid to use a gun that not everyone else thought was the best. He will think outside of the box, and if
Yeah.
it works for him, he'll go with it.
He's pretty much what Josh said, the trendsetter. He was one of the first to pull out a shotgun and really just run havoc with it. And you're sat there, you're looking at it, and you're like, really? Is he gonna do that? And it works, and that's the phenomenal thing. And then when you think about that, you gel that in with the likes of Tommy, who's very good at calling shots, and then the likes of Jerd, who's very good at just running around and killing things.
And Smarties, let's go, boys.
And that was a terrible. Please never ever
Sorry,
do that
Swanee.
again. No.
Let's go, boys.
The whole of Europe found that offensive, so
I
stop.
can't.
But you add Swanee, who's pretty much at times can just be part of the map, immovable. You can't get rid of him. And that lineup to me is just so good on paper. And I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty surprised that TCM, took them. I think it was 3-1 in the grand final. Josh would probably be able to correct me. It was 3-1, right? Yeah.
So,
I was surprised at that.
Well, we're going to see who comes out on top, whether it's going to be TCM, will it be Epsilon, or maybe another European team. We will be covering 5 more European teams. But before we're done with Epsilon, guys, we're going to take a commercial break. But I wanted to show you some gameplay from these guys. It's a game from the Gfinity EU Championship. Stay tuned. Epsilon versus Vitality Rises, one of the games from that epic series, coming up after this.